The meaning of joy according to the Bible. A sermon on the deep gladness of the soul. My dear friends, today we gather to reflect on one of the most beautiful gifts that God places within the human heart, joy. Joy is a word we hear often. We see it written on greeting cards, sung in songs, and spoken in moments of celebration. Yet the joy described in the Bible is far deeper than the happiness we usually think of. Happiness often depends on circumstances. It rises when life goes well and fades when difficulties come. But the joy the Bible speaks of is something different. It is deeper. It is stronger. It is steadier. Biblical joy is not merely a fleeting emotion. It is a state of the soul. It is the quiet, unshakable gladness that comes from knowing God and trusting in His love. In the book of Nehemiah we read these powerful words. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Think about that for a moment. Joy is not only a feeling. According to the Bible, it is a source of strength. It sustains us when life becomes difficult. It lifts our spirits when we feel weary. It reminds us that hope still lives within us. To understand joy according to the Bible is to discover one of the greatest treasures of the spiritual life. Joy begins with God. The first truth the Bible teaches about joy is this: true joy begins with God. In Psalm 16 we read these beautiful words. You make known to me the path of life, in your presence there is fullness of joy. Notice what the psalmist says. In God's presence there is fullness of joy. Not partial joy. Not temporary joy. But fullness. This tells us something profound. Joy is not something we manufacture on our own. It grows naturally when our hearts draw near to God. When we recognize His goodness, when we trust His guidance, when we remember His promises, joy begins to rise within us. Even in difficult seasons, the awareness that God walks beside us fills the heart with peace and gladness. Joy in the creation of the world. The Bible begins with a story of creation, and within that story we see hints of divine joy. When God created the world, the mountains, the oceans, the forests, the stars, He looked upon His creation and called it good. Creation itself reflects the joy of God. The beauty of nature, the laughter of children, the warmth of friendship, the wonder of life, all of these are echoes of God's joy woven into the fabric of the world. Psalm 19 tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God. When we step outside and see a sunrise, hear birds singing, or watch waves rolling across the sea, we are reminded that joy is part of God's design for life. Joy in God's promises. Throughout the Bible, God's promises bring joy to His people. When Abraham and Sarah were told that they would have a child in their old age, their story was filled with amazement and laughter. In fact, their son was named Isaac, which means laughter. Joy often appears in the Bible when God's promises unfold in unexpected ways. When the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt, their hearts were filled with joy and songs of praise. When the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt after years of hardship, the people celebrated with great rejoicing. These stories remind us that joy grows when we witness God's faithfulness. Even when the journey is long, God's promises eventually bring hope and gladness. The joy of Christ's birth. One of the most beautiful moments of joy in the Bible appears in the story of Jesus' birth. On a quiet night in Bethlehem, angels appeared to shepherds watching their flocks in the fields. The shepherds were ordinary people, living simple lives, unaware that history was about to change. Suddenly, the sky was filled with heavenly light, and an angel spoke these words. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Great joy. The birth of Jesus was announced not as a message of fear or judgment, but as a message of joy. Why? Because Jesus came to bring hope to a weary world. He came to heal the brokenhearted. He came to restore what had been lost. The arrival of Christ was the beginning of a new chapter in God's relationship with humanity. And that chapter was filled with joy. Joy in the life of Jesus. As we follow the life of Jesus through the Gospels, we see joy appearing in many ways. Jesus brought joy to those who were suffering. When He healed the sick, joy returned to their lives. When He forgave those burdened by guilt, joy replaced shame. When He welcomed those rejected by society, joy filled their hearts with dignity and belonging. One powerful example is the story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, disliked by many people because of his profession. Yet when Jesus visited his home and showed him kindness, Zacchaeus was transformed. The Bible tells us he received Jesus with great joy. That moment shows us something important. When grace enters our lives, joy follows. Joy even in difficult times. Perhaps one of the most remarkable teachings in the Bible is that joy can exist even during hardship. This idea may seem surprising at first. How can joy exist when life is difficult? Yet the Bible repeatedly encourages believers to hold on to joy even in the midst of challenges. The Apostle Paul writes in the book of Philippians, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice." What makes these words remarkable is that Paul wrote them while he was in prison. Despite uncertainty and suffering, Paul continued to speak about joy. His joy did not depend on circumstances. It depended on his relationship with God. This teaches us that biblical joy is deeper than the ups and downs of life. It is rooted in faith, hope, and trust. Joy as a fruit of the Spirit. In the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul describes what he calls the fruit of the Spirit. These are qualities that grow naturally in a heart connected to God. Among them are love, peace, patience, kindness, and joy. Joy is listed as one of the fruits of the Spirit. This means joy grows within us when our lives are guided by God's presence. Just as a tree produces fruit when it receives sunlight and nourishment, the human heart produces joy when it remains connected to God's love. Joy becomes a natural expression of a life rooted in faith. Joy that strengthens the heart. The Bible tells us that joy strengthens us. Life inevitably brings challenges. There are seasons of uncertainty, moments of loss, and times when our strength feels small. But joy acts like a light within the soul. It reminds us that darkness does not have the final word. The joy of the Lord gives us courage to keep moving forward. It reminds us that hope still lives. And sometimes the quiet presence of joy is the very thing that carries us through difficult days. Sharing joy with others. Joy is not meant to remain hidden within us. It is meant to be shared. When people live with joy, it spreads naturally to those around them. A joyful heart encourages others. A joyful spirit lifts the atmosphere of a room. A joyful life becomes a testimony of faith. Throughout the Bible we see communities celebrating together, singing together, and rejoicing together in God's goodness. Joy multiplies when it is shared. The joy of gratitude. One of the simplest ways to experience joy is through gratitude. When we pause to appreciate the blessings in our lives, both large and small, our hearts naturally become more joyful. The Bible encourages us to give thanks in all circumstances. Gratitude opens our eyes to the goodness already present around us. It shifts our attention away from what is missing and toward what has been given. And as gratitude grows, joy grows alongside it. Eternal joy. Finally, the Bible speaks of a joy that goes beyond this life. The book of Revelation describes a future where sorrow, pain, and tears will be no more. In God's presence, joy will be complete and everlasting. This promise gives believers hope. It reminds us that the struggles of this world are temporary, but the joy God offers is eternal. One day, all things will be restored. And joy will fill creation completely. A final reflection. My friends, the joy described in the Bible is not shallow or temporary. It is deep. It is resilient. It is rooted in the love of God. This joy does not ignore the challenges of life, but it shines through them like light through the clouds. When we walk with God, trust His promises, and open our hearts to His presence, joy begins to grow within us. It becomes a strength for our journey, a light for our path, and a gift we can share with the world. May we learn to live with joyful hearts. May we remember that God's love surrounds us even in difficult times. And may the joy of the Lord become the strength that guides us through every season of life. Amen.